So, Karen, this is the kind of subject matter that, goes beyond our area here. I don't know if there's other people that are outside of our time zone that get this, but definitely, has some broader implications in other areas of the country.
It is huge. That's why we like to be able to send it out and let folks know what's going on here, and part of the community conversation is larger, most definitely. So how about we get underway and then other people can jump in as their schedules allow, all right? So welcome to today's community conversation. I'm Karen Simmons from the Chester County Community Foundation, and today we have some wonderful social and environmental justice talks on this April Earth Day month. And Todd Pride from Legacy Land and Water Partners, and Carmera Thomas-Wilhite, Carmera, I'm going to fracture your name until you say it once for me, are thought leaders. How about Todd, would you introduce yourself, and then I'm going to get Carmera's night, and we'll go quickly around just so folks can let us know who's who.
Yeah, Karen, thank you. Yeah, glad to be able to participate here. I am a president of a relatively new operation in the land conservation space, on one end, Legacy Land and Water Partners. And at the core of this work are 15 years of leading one of the larger training operations for students and adults in fishing, birding, hunting heritage, sustainable regenerative agriculture, all grounded in conservation. Actually, an organization called the Mid-Atlantic Youth Anglers and Outdoors Partners. We've been at ground zero, as I call it, around a lot of these environmental justice issues for the last 15 years. And in addition to the work with both of these operations, I sit on a few boards that are also connected to some of the issues we're going to talk about today. I'm one of the newer board members for the Pennsylvania Game Commission, which is our state wildlife agency here in Pennsylvania. And then also locally, the Alliance for Health Equity. I'm a trustee there, and dealing with a lot of these issues. And then specifically around some of the water land issues, I'm vice chair of the Chester County Water Resources Authority and a board member of the October Watershed Association, which encompasses actually a part of what Carmera is responsible for. So some really good conversation points we'll share throughout this next hour or so, and really looking forward to an interactive exchange, because I know we've got some really talented people here on the Zoom. So we'll guide some discussion. We'll all listen and learn. And Karen, let me pass it back to you.
And I'm going to ask Carmera to introduce herself. Thank you very much, Todd. I am so glad you could make today's TED, I call it a TED Talk, but community conversation. Carmera.
Yes, thank you, Karen. And it's so great to present with Todd. My name is Carmera Thomas-Wilhite, and I am the Vice President for Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Justice at the Chesapeake Bay Foundation. I have worked as a community organizer. I have spent a lot of my time doing restoration with a background in biology, or tree restoration, oyster restoration. Also spent some time working at a hospital, working on health impacts and around health determinants in Baltimore City. And then also working at the Conservation Fund, most recently working on equitable park development in the Mid-Atlantic region around the Southeast. So I have a background that has spans many different subject matters, but I am very passionate about environmental justice. I am really passionate about working with people to make their communities better and make their lives better, and thinking about some of the issues and solutions as we think about the crisis of climate change and pollution issues around the Chesapeake Bay watershed. So I just want to thank you so much for having me.
I'm glad you're here today, very much so. I would like to just do, if people would, just a 10-second intro. what organization do you represent? And if it's a community foundation, I'm going to talk for you just for a sec, like Paige is in charge of our logistics for today. Thank you. And Malcolm is arts and culture outreach. He's our get on board initiator. Beth Kay is in our marketing and analytics. But who else? Bill Lambert, what organization do you represent, sir? Oh, you can all unmute yourself for just a minute while we go around. Bill, you're a volunteer, but you're muted. Lee, can you introduce yourself? Lee Lassaw?
I am Leah Nassau. I am the Executive Director of Acts of Generosity, which is a private foundation here in southeastern Pennsylvania.
I am glad you're here. Mr. McKenna?
Hi, I'm John McKenna. I'm a board member of the Community Foundation. I've been a board member about 4 years now. An attorney here in town, and I'm very interested in this topic, very much so.
Thanks, John. Ms. Chang?
Hi, my name is Colin Chang. I'm the program manager for Early Learning Resource Center, Region 19. That's the county presence, and we are the subsidized child care funding assistance program for low-income working families.
Thank you. Mr. Derrico down in Oxford. How you doing, sir?
Doing well. My name is Anthony Derrico. I'm the executive director here all the way down in Oxford at the Oxford Arts Alliance.
Close to the Chesapeake Bay. Ms. Freeman, good to see you.
Hi, I'm Meg Freeman, and I am a former board member of the Chesapeake Bay Foundation. I'm sorry, of the Chester County Community Foundation, and a current board member of the Chesapeake Bay Foundation.
There we
And
go.
I'm so thrilled to be here today with Carmera, who represents an incredible leadership team that we have, Chesapeake Bay Foundation. And I was able to be on her first day of work on the last board meeting. Was her second time coming back to the Chesapeake Bay Foundation as having been an intern. So it's come full circle, and we're thrilled that she's a part of our leadership team.
Thank you. Mr. Nelson.
Timmy Nelson, Chester County Community Foundation.
And Bill Lambert, I see you zoom back in. I want to give you a chance to introduce.
Well, my name is Bill Lambert, and I'm curious about all efforts with conservation, both of land and water. We have to do something quick, or else the progeny that we're putting out there for coming days will really be over a barrel. And I've often said to my wife and others, I'm glad I'm on the way out instead of the way in, because the problems that these younger ones have to face coming along are really going to be substantial.
Where's all the people?
Thank you, Bill. You're right.
What a sad legacy.
We got time to fix, but not much. Sandy Shaw, can you just say what organization you might represent as we go around?
I am a retired teacher. I live in Westchester. I'm a member of the community and very much appreciative of the Community Foundation noon conversations. And so I'm just a participant from the community.
Great, thank you. Ms. Mosley.
Yes, my name is Carolyn Mosley, and I am one of the leaders in the Eastwick community here in Philadelphia. And I'm also the regional hub leader with the National Black Environmental Justice Network.
Great.
That extends into the Chesapeake area.
Thank you. Ms. Washington.
Good afternoon, Renee Washington. I wear many hats. Today, it's the Buildings and Grounds Manager from the Charles A. Mountain Arts and Education Center. I also represent the Westchester branch of the NAACP. And about 20 years ago, I worked with the Chester County Conservation District and with USDA. So I'm all in for environmental justice.
Thank you, Cookie. Ms. Maxwell, can you introduce real quick?
Good afternoon. My name is Latisha Maxwell. I'm the Special Projects Director at Philabundance.
Oh, welcome. Ms. Groening. Ms. Beatty? You're honorable. DeBaptiste.
Hi, good morning. My name is Lillian DeBaptiste. I'm a business owner and the mayor of Westchester.
Thank you. And Ms. Beatty?
Hi, I'm Kathy Beatty, and I'm here with my husband, Chris, and we are members of UCWC, and I feel very strongly in the environment. We support it strongly.
Welcome. Octavia Litvinoff. There you go.
Did a fantastic job with that.
Oh.
Yeah, my name is Octavia Litvinoff. I am here as a personal interest. I work for Morgan Lewis, a law firm out of Philadelphia, a law firm, and I serve on their sustainability committee. For me, these types of conversations are important to have, and I'm looking forward to continuing them. Thank you.
Thank you. Karen Schurer? Alyssa Kovich? Ajane.
Hi.
Hello.
Good afternoon, all. My name is Mr. Ajene Livingston.
I'll get there. I'm getting there. Ajane. Thank you.
Yep, no problem. It's been a while, Karen, so I know you definitely get some grace. So I'm a Coatesville resident. Of course, this particular topic, I wear the hat of the Coastal Parks and Recreation Commission chairperson, but I think it's a topic that we all resonate with in one form or fashion.
Thank you. Ms. Hammond, would you introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm sorry I'm late. My name is Alice Hammond. I hope there wasn't a question, was there?
No, just what
Okay,
organization
good.
are you representing so we know who we're
Okay.
talking with?
Thank you. My name is Alice Hammond, and I'm representing the Westchester branch of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, the NAACP. And I'm glad to be here with you today. I might have to leave early, but I said I have to do this because I really am very interested in the environmental justice that we have to, we have to work on. We really do. We have to work on it a lot. So thank you for having me.
Always, always. Sarah Dickens Trujillo. Are you still there, Sarah? Or Marisol Maldon?
Hi, this is Sarah. I'm sorry, I had another meeting, but my name is Sarah Dickens. I work for Mighty Riders in Chester County, and we support the Latino students and their families. We have an after-school program, but we make sure that we help them with identify with their culture and any other needs they have. Thank you for the invite.
Thank you, Sarah. And Marisol. Did I forget anybody who's able to introduce themselves briefly? Shall we jump in? Thank you for taking the time. I'd like to know who's in the room. So we have a handout, and if you haven't received it, we will also resend it at the end of the session, plus it's online. And so today, what we'd like to do is have Carmera and Todd present some of as thought leaders, present some ideas and have a discussion going. I have a feeling it'll go long because we got a big group, and I have a feeling they can generate a lot of discussion. We will decide whether to go into breakout rooms or to continue as a plenary. We will decide whether we should also show the TED Talk or have you do it individually. But I'd really like to take advantage of the fact that we have Carmera and Todd with us here live on Zoom today. So thanks for everybody for getting the word out. And I think you know ground rules. And you are welcome to eat away. So, you know what? Let's get rolling on the topic at hand, environmental justice. Carmera, what can you tell us?
Yeah, thank you so much. So this is really about defining what environmental justice is. And I wanted to just share a little bit about the brief history of environmental justice. This movement has really been going on since the civil rights movement, and people of color and low income communities have been overburdened by toxins and poor living conditions in their communities for many decades. And following protests by communities in Memphis, Tennessee, as Black sanitation workers were protesting polluted work conditions in the late 1980s in Warren County, North Carolina, where toxic soil was intentionally dumped in a facility adjacent to a Black community, despite their protests. People have been fighting environmental burdens, which have led to different summits that have laid out a process to really growing environmental justice on a national level. There are many groups that are focusing now on climate crisis and focusing on the solutions, not only to reduce the impacts of climate change, but also to ensure that equitable distribution of resources is key to that movement, and also thinking about displacement of people. There is a lot of data out there that vulnerable communities, marginalized communities, elders, Black and Brown, children, low-income communities, not only are vulnerable, but suffer disproportionately from decades of disinvestment, intentional poor planning, inequities, redlining. Your zip code can determine your life expectancy. And we see that with a lot of information around where facilities are built, where communities are able to speak up and speak out about what is happening in zoning, in their area and in their neighborhood. So we see a lot of disparity and disproportionate impact on vulnerable populations. Next slide. Environmental racism is not new. As I mentioned before, the history of the movement itself, but again, pollution and poor planning, intentional practices like redlining and displacement into public housing and other things, the intersection of that really affects people of color. We know that, it is really where people are able to be invested and where investment happens in communities as well. I'm not as familiar with Chester County, so I will ask Todd to chime in if possible, but this map I played around with it a little bit and noticed some of the hot spots around some of the overlay layers of the ArcGIS map, but just showing where communities in Chester County are and how these communities in particular are affected. They're below the poverty line, for economics, and we know that a lot of the intersection of social determinants, health, environmental injustice, and economics does have an effect on communities. So again, your zip code can determine your life expectancy due to pollution, and most of the percentage of the people living in these places that have the circle are people of color. Oh, that's okay.
I'm sorry. I actually was wondering if Todd wanted to add to that, and I was trying to find you on my screen.
No, I'm glad, Karen, that this slide is here. When Carmera and I were talking prior to this, coincidentally yesterday, there was a subcommittee meeting for our Chester County Watersheds 2045 plan that I sit on the committee for. And actually the first point that was brought out as part of some of the priority areas that we're speaking to and addressing for this new plan were these EJ areas. And it really jumped out to me. I mean, now having been out here 7 years and seeing my, somewhat hometown of Oxford, listed here, but was glad to see this. But, here in such a county that, has so many tremendous resources, we do have some significant pockets of where EJ issues are now really at the forefront of focusing on planning. So was glad to see this here.
All right.
You.
What else do we have?
Climate
World
change.
Health Org.
Yeah, so climate change impacts, again, another data set really looking at communities, Brown and Black communities that are not only impacted by climate change, but also the most alarmed and concerned about it. And this can come from just the exposure of flooding and storms and droughts, displacement. And I will also add that, generations, of environmental injustice was also exacerbated, throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, and health impacts and that were already plaguing poor and communities of color just really lend to more climate change impacts. and really thinking about how, again, that intersection of health and social determinants, environment and economics really, does not only cause many deaths, over the thinking about the deaths, but also thinking about future impacts as well, displacement and climate, migrants and other things like that, that people will have to deal with due to inadequate housing and infrastructure in their community, from pipes overflowing to flooding in their homes, to just flooding in the streets. I live in Maryland, so there are many stories. I don't know if it ever made national news, but where there was a bus stuck in the middle of the road from flooding in Baltimore, and people had to be rescued from their cars. And it's just a lot of that water was just inundated in that community, and so many years of infrastructure, creeks and streams being piped over, and all that water having really nowhere to go. So we see that not only on the shorelines in communities, but also upstream, where I know in Pennsylvania you're at the top of the watershed. So we see in a lot of cities, flooding and storms being the larger impact of not only pollution to the Chesapeake Bay, but also the impacts of climate.
So climate and health impacts.
Yeah, so it's really important to just highlight again the places that have the orange or red rectangle around them. These are places that have the highest asthma in the county, in the city. So again, air pollution from many different sources, point and non-point sources, health-related impacts. Chesapeake Bay Foundation did a study a while ago around a trash incinerator in Baltimore, that around that area, not only is there the trash incinerator, but also the 95 corridor, where most of the communities surrounding that area with coal fire plants, trash incinerator, and that 95 highway, they have the highest asthma rates. They have the highest school, children being sick and missing school absence rate around Baltimore City. So I am confident that data is very similar in the 3 areas that are marked here as well, where you see those health issues impacting people because of where they live, because of what is surrounding them in their neighborhood and their community. It's also really important to just understand that, these are communities that have already been disinvested in because of so many intentional practices. So they're overburdened, and it takes a lot of speaking up in communities that are doing that, but not many of them have been heard or have been paid attention to. So it's really just caused a lot of health impacts on communities, especially communities of color and lower income.
Incinerator downtown.
I think there's one more slide in this section of my, yep. Great. And again, Todd, I think we'll talk a little bit about this, but just the impact of Black neighborhoods and flood risk. And again, this leads to, a point that I made already about redlining and housing practices, but it's also important to note that sometimes there isn't an obvious solution in these communities, and, decisions that we make have the potential to affect a lot of different people, a lot of different communities and backgrounds, races, cultures, other, other things as well. It does impact, unfortunately, communities of color, especially Black and Brown communities, because of the racist practices that have happened in this country. But we know that it is, climate change in particular is hitting all communities, and it's not unique, to just one race or ethnic group.
All right, so we start to get the facts.
That's right.
Okay, Todd, you got the forever chemical one. Forever, not the legacy we want. Oh, you have to unmute yourself, Todd. You're muted.
Sorry about that. I'm normally the one telling other people to unmute. Well, let me just say, Karen, first of all, wow, as we think about this jump, as it may seem, but a very connected point to the environmental justice issues that Carmera just, touched on. I think for a lot of us in our professional and personal challenges, I mean, these EJ issues just continue to grow. And as we were preparing for this session today, I shared with some of Karen's team that I think it's important that we start to increase the elevation that environmental justice is actually in every one of our communities. And, I specifically, relative to Karen, you leading this, and for where all of us are here, for the most part here in Chester County, as Carmera and I were talking, preparing for today, I said, when we finish this session, where do we go from here? What do we do with the things that we're going to talk about here? And I challenge all of us, but plant the seed that we're here in Chester County, and we're the wealthiest county in the state of Pennsylvania. This county was extremely important to the democracy that we're all living in. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time with history. I guess one of the other points I should have made regarding my background is also being a trustee for the Chester County History Center, which directly connects to a lot of these issues. We have a lot of industry here in Chester County that has been a part of a number of the things that we're going to be talking about over the next half an hour or so. This jump from the impact on our Black and Brown communities, as Carmera highlighted, I think for many of us have heard of recent, and I think it's just been the last 2-3 years have we started to hear about these forever chemicals, the technical name, the perfluora and polyfluoroalkyl substances that were established actually, back in the 1950s. Now over 9,000 of these that have been identified. And these products, as we're hearing, are in cleaning products, water-resistant fabrics, such as rain jackets, umbrellas, tents. Grease-resistant paper was actually one of the first sources. So these were food wrappers that a number of our chemical companies made to keep the liquids from hamburgers and others from getting out of those paper issues. And so that was the start of a lot of this non-stick cookware, and then personal products, and then stain-resistant coatings in carpets, upholstery, and other fabrics. For me personally, over the last 3 years, I have started throwing out a whole lot of things, such as what's on this list. And I would ask all of you to think about just taking the steps of what we need to do. And that next point says, for 70 years, a number of our companies have known that these PFAS, PFAS, PFOS, had these carcinogenic components to, the composition. So not going to spend a lot of time on that, but just something that I, say to everybody here, if forever chemicals are not on your personal radar, you need to. The CDC has now started to outline this. I think EPA within the last 2 months has just started issuing regulations around forever chemicals in our drinking water. So again, something to pay attention to. And again, the bullet points there just speak to the issues. And I'll just make this point here, something that some of you may have heard of. Many of our lives have been touched by cancer, and so many of these environmental justice issues. And the point that I've been making in a number of my circles is when we contribute to and think about how do we address cancer, how do we slow it down, my point is we need to stop making things that cause cancer. And these PFAS, forever chemicals are really at ground zero for these issues. So, something we'll talk about a little bit later on. So next slide here.
Yeah, the connection is huge.
Oh, I did have a quick question, if that's okay.
Fabia,
Sure,
go right
absolutely.
ahead.
Jump in.
Yeah, do you have a list of either brands or products that are containing these PFAS chemicals?
There are a number of lists, out there, Octavia. I would say the Environmental Working Group is one of the main sources that has a list of these. So I would, Google, list of PFAS chemicals or forever chemicals. Probably the more important list are, and there are a number of them that are starting to make their way out into major media, is to research or Google products that don't contain forever chemicals. Because most of the manufacturers, if not all of the manufacturers that were involved, and again, this is decades ago from when these were developed. I mean, the leadership of most of these chemical companies have now taken the step in the direction to develop alternative products, which also were a bit questionable. But yeah, there's quite a bit of resources that are available, through a Google search. So.
And the link at the bottom is a helpful way to get started.
Yeah. Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
That is in the chat, right? Okay, because I can't click on your link.
Oh, and we'll also send
I'll
it.
add it to the chat, sure, but the slides are in the chat as well.
Perfect, thanks.
Thank you.
Slide here. And so moving from these forever chemicals, unfortunately, for those of us in this region, we have seen very close to us in our communities a number of these chemical accidents that have taken place and continue to take place. And as this slide is highlighting, the numbers that just in these last few years, I mean, the first 7 weeks of this year, we've already had more than 30 incidents. I mean, one every 1.5 days. Last year, 188. Year before that, 177. And we can see the states across the country where these are taking place. And as you can probably imagine, there's a lot of commonality, across these states. Our energy resource facilities, agricultural resource facilities, our areas out west actually that are challenged by our weather patterns and impact of climate change. And then there within the core of that, some of our areas that are very much our agricultural footprints in this country. So really cutting across so many different sectors, and there circled at the bottom is where we are. And you can see from the dots on the map there, where this is taking place, which is pretty much everywhere where the majority of the people in our country are. So very daunting visual here for all of us. Next slide.
And daunting visual.
Absolutely.
Oh, sorry.
Yep.
Yep.
And so as what we've seen of recent in the last couple of months, and the February 20, derailment in East Palestine, and I believe coming out of that there were 3 or 4 from the I think same rail line operator, that rail line out there. I mean, actually for the PA Game Commission. This wasn't widely publicized, but 2 of our major state game lands were right there and had to be evacuated there, right on the border of Pennsylvania and Ohio. And again, we've seen these happen over a period of time. What jumped out to me after the first couple of weeks of the analysis and study of what was happening in East Palestine, and then some of the other communities where these derailments were taking place, where the equipment investments were a lot less and not as sophisticated, as I'll just use that term, as in other higher income communities. So as these rail lines are moving through, our communities in our states, what we're starting to see more is that, the different components and just necessary elements of these rail lines in a lot of our communities that are unfortunately Black and brown communities, are most of our low-income communities, how our rail lines are being managed. And again, I'm not going to call out any specific companies, but we're seeing just not as much of an investment in some of the same equipment on these same rail lines in communities that have a different socioeconomic mix. So I'm not going to go through every bullet point here, but I think it's pretty clear, what we're dealing with right now, that have been not only just years in the making, but, just things that we're going to continue to have to stay on top of. And again, that last orange point, we're averaging 1 chemical accident every 2 days. Next slide. So we're going to make a bit of a jump here.
Yeah.
And so when we think about our Black and brown communities, as Carmera had touched on in terms of around the definitions of environmental justice and why these incidents are happening. I've been facilitating diversity training for the last 15 years, being in this outdoor space, and one of the the clearest things that I have seen, and Karen, I'll say this, even having moved out here to Chester County 7 years ago, one, just, further understanding the deep history that we have here. But one of the questions that I received often is, Todd, why are the majority of African Americans and Hispanics, living, say, just in Philadelphia or even here in Chester County? And what was known to be for many years that, we've all heard the term redlining, and redlining as we knew it were the mortgage policies that, didn't enable African Americans to live in certain areas. And oftentimes that focus were on urban communities. I think, just in the last year, there've been a number of maps just in Philadelphia, where redlining is still taking place. But when we look at our suburban communities, and here in Chester County or in Maryland, the decision of African Americans and Hispanics to want to live in certain places isn't because they decided that they actually just wanted to be near people that look like them. We were not allowed to live in suburban communities. And the history of this started, and this is really what I call the deep dive into redlining, which was back in 1933 from FDR's New Deal, which did a lot, for this country coming out of our World War, the Depression. But also this was the time where, where we live is, that line was actually drawn, and that line still exists to this day. And so when we think about where a lot of these incidents are taking place, whether or not it's our, derailments, and as we think about where our facilities are, when we think about where our rail yards are, we think about where our landfills are, we think about where our major, heavy manufacturing facilities are, we're in these areas. So, while our communities of Black and Brown were limited to where they could go because of the inability to access a mortgage, intentionally, a number of these facilities were then established, in those areas, or those redlining policies were established in and around, those areas where we had landfills and others, lower property values. So, as you'll see here in terms of just these, specific points of why our communities look the way they do. Chester County, by and large, looks the way it does right now because of these policies. So again, when we think about the broader impact of environmental justice, this is one of the major factors, but we're all now, and I think the first slide that you saw regarding forever chemicals, we're all being touched by this. And as we think about environmental justice, we need to think about it in the same way we think about air and water for every single one of us in our families and our communities. These issues are no longer, in the African-American community and our Hispanic communities, we've been dealing with this for many years, but the opportunity that we have. And so as part of my work, as I think about this and the work that we're doing and trying to get more people, more Black and Brown, and even in the white community into areas that allow us to rethink, how we engage with our natural resource areas. It's the reason why Legacy Land and Water Partners was formed a few years ago to really focus on some of these cultural areas. And it's not just green space. It's great to be out in green space, but the one thing that we have in this area that it was a part of what I call the veins of our democracy, and jumping to the next slide, are the open spaces on our Underground Railroad trails. And I consider, these are our environmental justice trails, these pathways of, where both, not only just African Americans, but the white community banded together, back in that, during that period of the 1800s to create these opportunities for, African Americans and others to move north. But oftentimes, as we know, that move north, took us into areas that this previous slide highlighted on, where we had to reside in our concentrated urban areas and not necessarily engaged in nature. And we're trying to change that, with the partners that we have here in not just Chester County, but down in the Chesapeake Bay Area, New Jersey, New York, Delaware. We see a lot of opportunity for, opening up the preservation of these spaces, which are not as environmentally challenged, but just giving us a clear understanding that, we've got to protect everywhere within our community. So Karen, I appreciate the opportunity just to kind of highlight some of these components, because it's everywhere. It's everywhere. And if we don't continue to focus on these EJ issues, you know, some of these areas that we have that are open spaces here will become, okay, our EJ areas. So this is not something that we can turn a blind eye to, but we have to stay focused on.
So the question at hand is, what can we do?
Yeah, can you go back to the previous slide?
You'd like this? Oh,
Yeah,
I'm
that
sorry,
one.
that slide.
Yeah, thank you. Great. So yeah, again, you know, with all of that information and data, it's just great to have context and understanding of where things were and, you know, how we are coming along and learning, you know, from those previous mistakes and those intentionalities, and really thinking about inclusivity and how we can better understand the communities where we're working. It's really important to me, you know, mentioning just the Chesapeake Bay watershed in particular. I didn't mention that I live in, I think maybe I mentioned I'm in Maryland, but there are 18 million people that live in the Chesapeake Bay watershed. And imagine, you know, 6 states, DC, 64,000 square miles. And, you know, even thinking outside of that, you know, Philadelphia and other cities that just are on the edge of the watershed are all impacting not only the waters and the streams and creeks and the waterways that lead to the bay and to the ocean, but, you know, all the other smaller tributaries and the land, like Todd mentioned, you know, thinking about preservation and land conservation. So, you know, what can you do? I think it's so important to build those personal connections. The work that I do is really important to share, you know, your connection to the bay, your connection to nature, and then that helps you understand a little bit better how to address some of those issues that we talked about. Understanding those concerns, having people share their story, their experience, connecting people to the work. You know, there are a few different people or communities mentioned here, federal and state partners, tribal communities. You know, everyone has their own connection, their own solutions that they're working on, but really thinking about being more collaborative. It's also really key to ask those really specific questions about who's invested in this work, what voices aren't being heard, what powers we have, you know, in these different sectors, what resources we have, and how can we take the lead to tell our elected officials and hold them accountable to this work. It's really key to work alongside communities and not just thinking for them, and really creating these partnerships to engage and create solutions that influence policies and practices to really integrate people. Many of our organizations are mission driven, and so many of them, including my own, have so long thought about the water quality and the crabs and the oysters, but not really thinking about the people that live in the watershed. But so much is made up of, you know, who lives there and who's impacted by it. So next slide. And this is just one way that you could be involved. You know, Chesapeake Bay Foundation is a large organization. We do many different things like environmental education and thinking about restoration projects. And we also have a lot of our state offices are working on legislative advocacy. So this is one tool that we use to engage with our elected officials and creating champions or advocates around the Chesapeake Bay watershed to either oppose, you know, different laws and policies, but also to support some of those environmental policies that will make the most impact. There's also, you know, regulatory and education and community advocacy. So there are many different resources. There's a website there that you can, you know, check out to get involved. We have different programs where we have stewards who are learning about the Bay, but also learning about their neighborhood and doing capstone projects that are most meaningful to them, and getting involved during the many different legislative sessions, you know, in our various state offices, but also just connecting to the resource. And I think that's so important. You know, that one slide that Todd had about inclusivity and being outside and connecting to nature, that's one way to just explore the resource. And that's when you're engaged in it, you're connected to it, that's where you're more inclined to save it or to advocate for it when you have that personal connection. So I think that is so important for anyone.
Thank you.
I
Yeah,
just want to add just some thought words when we think about this environmental justice, but to think about it as the environment and just us. You know, I just came out of a group meeting at the Brandywine Conservancy, and I think a couple people here, I think Sarah from Mighty Riders was sitting right next to me, who's here, was there, and we were actually talking about expanding some fishing activities here in this area, you know, targeted towards the Hispanic community. And as many of us that are Black and brown know, it's ingrained in our culture. But we talked quite a bit about the fish consumption advisory that exists here in this area, in a relatively very high income area, even with some of our small communities like, you know, Kennett Square and others. And we were talking about the quality of the water, okay, and the fish species in the water here. We weren't talking about, okay, the water down in, say, downtown Wilmington or somewhere else, or, you know, we were talking about right here. And so I want all of us to, and others that you touch, and Carmera, I'm glad you know, we had highlighted a couple times, you know, reach out to our elected officials and and stay in contact with our elected officials, and not make it about, you know, an incident that comes up, but just, you know, that constant focus on the environment and just us, because it is everywhere. And if we don't focus on it and we turn a blind eye, we deal with some of the issues that we do. I mean, you know, not only is that community of East Palestine impacted by that derailment and the spill there, but, you know, what's downwind of that? I mean, as we saw back on the slides earlier regarding the communities, the towns, the cities that are most impacted by a lot of these issues, a number of these are communities that are downwind, okay, of industry and other manufacturing areas, you know, up from them. And as Carmera knows, and many of you do here, so much of the focus on the cleanup, the environmental issues in the Chesapeake Bay largely originate here in Pennsylvania. And, you know, Chester County is right here, not at the apex of it, but, you know, we are a part of that. And to me, there's an opportunity for us to elevate these. So when any of us are down at a tiki bar on the Susquehanna, excuse me, either the Susquehanna River or the Upper Chesapeake Bay, and we're sitting there at the marina and we're having dinner with family and friends, we're not removed from these environmental EJ issues when we're there. Okay, they're right there and present. And so we just need to constantly think about the things that are needed everywhere where we are, and be connected to the organizations that we are. And just because we live here in Pennsylvania doesn't mean we should not be reaching out to legislators in other areas where we vacate, okay, and others, but to stay connected to it. So I just wanted to make that point as we start to get into the meat of some of the questions from the group here.
Well, let's actually deal with, are you okay if we go to the discussion questions?
Yeah, absolutely.
Really, I mean,
You're the boss.
What do we do? Okay, so, I mean, you've set a wonderful, quick groundwork for, you know, what has led to this, what we've done in the past. But everybody on this call is saying, so what can we do? And really, I mean, do we have comments from people about what's been discussed so far? What you've seen, what you've experienced, what brought you here that was an aha perhaps, but then what are you doing and what can we doing in our own communities on this? Can we toss it out for discussion, or would you like us to?
Carolyn has her hand up.
Go right ahead, please.
Thank you. Again, I'm Carolyn Mosley, and I live here in Philadelphia in an environmental injustice community. We check many boxes. We are located along the I-95 corridor. And again, I'm sort of wearing two hats here. Not only the one for my community in Eastwick here in Philadelphia, but also that of the regional hub leader with the National Black Environmental Justice Network. So what we've chosen to do is form collaborations with organizations up and down we're along the Delaware River watershed. So we have formed collaborations with all the communities from the top of the watershed, and we're at the bottom of the watershed. That's part of our problem, and we experience repetitive catastrophic flooding. And not only that, we are forming collaborations within our legislative districts, communities that are located in the the legislative districts where we share representation, because that helps to amplify our voices on at the political and social level. Also, community education is extremely important. There are some people living in an environmental justice community and they don't even know it. They don't realize it. We're also extending the olive branch to our elected officials to become educated in an environmental justice. It's not a new concept, but it is certainly, I think, a concept that many people just lack education and sufficient knowledge that it takes to make informed decisions, particularly when you're representing a constituency. You can't do politics over human life. You just can't do that. Not a nice thing to do. And on the national level, we're connected through the National Environmental Justice Network, because now you're aligned with organizations, community-based organizations across the country. What we realized is that we can't do this by ourselves as individuals, as community-based organizations, as communities, as anything. This is a movement. And the more alliances and stronger the alliance that we form, the more our voices are amplified and the issue doesn't die. And I'm going to paraphrase what Dr. Beverly Wright, she's one of the founders of NB, National Black Environmental Justice Network. Right now, there are historic amounts of funding out there available to address these issues. And if we don't take advantage of it, shame on us. Shame on us. So, we encourage, that, all organizations, become a part of a national organization, because this movement is something bigger than ourselves. I will put my information in the chat in terms of my contact information, because we are a hub that represents as far north as Jersey, far south as DC, far west as Virginia, and of course we're on the East Coast. So, we would certainly love to invite you all to do, be it education sessions. We do have some funding available for those kinds of things, and whatever we can do in a collaborative manner that will really amplify all of our voices, I think the better off we're going to be. Thank you.
Carolyn, you have been doing this work for so long and so well, and you have a great background that got you, ready for this. What skills do you bring to the table that makes you what are your superpowers? You're great.
Oh my goodness. Well, for 26 years, I worked for the city of Philadelphia in the housing department. And it was, in planning, in planning major developments. I was a project manager, spearheaded many large initiatives on behalf of the city of Philadelphia to produce affordable housing. By the time I was, moving into the retirement phase, I was, I assumed a role in policy and planning with the city of Philadelphia. So that really gave me a really good foundation and a really good understanding about how I'll say the not political mechanism, but the infrastructure in terms of the policymakers, how that all came about. After retiring, I did consulting work on with the Fair Housing Rights Center,
right?
Exploring discriminatory housing practices and that kind of thing. I have lived in my home for almost 30 years, and I began to learn more about the issues of this community, the environmental issues of this community, even just the history of it. It was, we're a product of a failed implementation of one of the largest urban renewal programs in the history of this country.
Yeah.
Displacing thousands of people, you know, and literally putting them in harm's way. And then everybody just brushed their, you know, wiped their hands and walked away from us. We've had very major, you know, flooding events from tropical storms and hurricanes, and people literally just left us hanging out to dry, literally. Not a paper towel, not a straw to suck up the water, nothing. You know, and people, we had the last major storm we had was Tropical Storm Isaias in 2020. No declaration of disaster from FEMA, no aid from the state. It took the city to offer us $100,000 so people could get heat and finally get heat in their homes. And we were in the midst of a pandemic where nobody wanted to come out and do anything. And it took actions of volunteers to assist our community and some of the homeowners, you know, to get mold out of their homes, to replace major systems, to, you know, to begin to rebuild their lives. And we're still recovering. We have come a very long way from that. And more, you know, we've just sort of stood at the top of the peak of the mountain and started screaming until we got to the federal level and really just forced the issue. Now the tables are turning. The tables have turned. And I'm really proud to say that. Are we where we need to be? No, but the media has been our best friend. We have several collaborators through educational institutions, Drexel, Penn, Villanova, Temple, you know, you name it. And their involvement and their willingness to do studies through grants that they get and some small J40 funding. But most of all, and what has also proven to be very effective is our involvement with the National Black Environmental Justice Network. I tell the politicians, lights, camera, now you're on. You want your legacy? Well, I'll give you your 5 minutes of fame. It's up to you to determine what that's going to be. You know, politicians don't like to be embarrassed, but I don't have a problem allowing themselves to embarrass themselves. And they need to know that because they work for us. You know, and it's educating people and changing the mindset that, oh, they won't let us do. No, they do what you do. You're the boss. Educating people and removing that, just removing that whole stigmatism that people are powerless, that we are powerless. We have to begin to empower people. That's our role. That's what we're here. That's the only way we're going to get through this.
And so you,
but I would love to link up with all of you.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen what you've been pushing for as one person getting the ball rolling and keeping it rolling and just being a powerful, loud community voice to make things happen. Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. So yeah, talk about what you can do in your own neighborhood. You've done a ton and there's more to do, but you've done. Anybody want to follow? Come on, Todd.
I'll just say Carolyn has blazed a trail in her work that I've been following for many years, having grown up in Philadelphia. And Carolyn, I think your housing work, I think, planted the seed, no pun intended, for some of this work. But you know, I know from the work that I did, and just recently having stepped off the board of the Friends of FDR Park in South Philadelphia, and just, you know, the environmental justice conundrum that exists down and around that area has just been, you know, it's just is a major thing for all of us to focus on, because it touches everybody, and not only just in the city, in that area, but, you know, that entire region. But Carol, I'm glad that you're here today sharing that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hard work and incredible inspiration.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you for everything you're doing.
Yeah.
Any
Carol,
other?
I just put a couple of links in the chat here just for.
Yeah, what did you throw in there? Please explain.
So I just put one of the recent articles, I think from last month, on CNN, highlighting the EPA's first ever standards for our drinking water and forever chemicals that I touched on earlier. And then for those of you that have not read the book, The Color of Law, to really understand all of what we're talking about here. I mean, I consider it required reading, but just listening to some of the short video clips from the author Richard Rothstein, and there's an 8-minute clip on YouTube and another longer one from some of his talks about the book, but it really gives the understanding of the connection between a lot of these environmental justice issues that we've talked about here, our Black and Brown community, and he doesn't even touch on, but leading to just the impact that we're seeing from these forever chemicals and other issues.
Thank you very much. There's so much to learn and so much to do. Our aim for today was to get people together so it can be on a similar page and have resources to understand, and then to be able to have some inspiration and for follow-up for what can we do in our own neighborhoods. I'm sensitive to the fact that our hour is up. We've been in a full group, which I think is appropriate because there's so many ideas that are coming out and information on the table. Anything for the good of the order as I guess we knew that this would be a long, good discussion. So please, on your own, watch our recommended TED Talk from Cheryl Holder. Todd or Carmera, do you want to say anything about this video as far as why it's important to see it and people should take the time to view it?
Yeah, I was just going to add that I think that we all know, and I think it's apparent here, that the intersection of all of these different issues comes together, and it's really apparent in this video, this TED Talk here, but just also thinking about immediate concerns of communities and why so many of our communities aren't involved because they're thinking about so many other things, but how we can align the work that we're doing within our organizations with their interests and concerns, and really thinking about just overall health in general, not just the physical health, but the social well-being and spiritual health of our communities as well, really can help us, be collaborative partners and really work together to just address so many of the environmental injustice and also health impacts. And I'm just going to put my email in the chat, for people's reference so that they can get in touch with me for any other questions that they may have.
Thank you.
Thank
Todd,
you.
would you like to say anything?
Yeah. Dr. Holder's 12-minute TED Talk, the number of times that I've looked at that, her personal experiences, I mean, I get the chills talking about this, really grounded me. And I think for anybody and for all of you that listen to it, again, 12 minutes of some experiences that she had, in coming up in Kingston, Jamaica, and then coming, here to the United States. Really, to me, is just an empowering message to what she then did with other doctors and others to start to elevate these issues, and particularly around, she uses examples of her travels during the early stages of the HIV here, to then just basically creating movement. So a really powerful message in terms of her connection between climate change and poverty and health. And so yeah, I'm sure it'll inspire all of us, and I'm glad, Karen, that your team kind of brought this forward to give some context of what Carmera and I were able to kind of speak to the group here, and hopefully this is just part one of this.
Yeah, and what it really gets me is the intersectionality between all of this, as you started to mention. It's about not just the environment, but the economy, health, social justice overall. I mean, in too many times we've tried to silo it, and we can't do that to get to this. So I want to thank everybody for joining us today. This is part of a continuing conversation and what can we do for action. So I know each of you are doing important things in your own part of the world, and thank you for helping to explain this to people who are newer to this, and for people who have been doing this for a while. The inspiration is amazing. So I thank you very much, and we'll send the handout to everybody. You'll continue to get invites to future sessions, and please, it's incredible what you're doing. So keep rolling. I think our next session, our next Zoom session in May, community conversation on healthcare. It's really being born Black and what the issues are, and what we can do about those. And then in June, we just want to make sure and get folks on a similar page when it comes to Juneteenth. So we'll have some pretty interesting conversations for the next couple of months as well. So every community conversation gives people inspiration, ideas, and brings people together. So thank you for everything you're doing. Incredible.
Karen, thank you for you and your team at the foundation for leading these and bringing people together and for really important subjects, and not only as a path forward, but as a reminder of the things that we all need to be doing together.
Thank you. And we're gonna see what to do with the copies of the handout and video too. I think there's a few of our lovely politicians who probably should see a little bit more of this. So we'll try to get the word out more. So thank you very much. Onward. Too much to do. All right. I appreciate all your time today and what you're doing forever. Thank you.
Thank you all.
so
Have a
much.
wonderful afternoon.
You too. Be healthy, please.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.